Welcome to this 2-minute tips video, and in this video we're going to be looking at in-camera HDR functionality in the Z series cameras. In a previous video we looked at active delighting, which is a piece of functionality particular to Nikon cameras that helps us deal with high contrast situations. HDR, or high dynamic range, is another piece of functionality that perhaps you're more used to in your smartphones, or you've perhaps seen or used in post-production. But with the increasing power of the processors on board our cameras, in particular the Z series mirrorless cameras from Nikon, the camera itself is able to do HDR. In the Z series, what this means in particular is that if you set it up, when you press the shutter, the camera will take two raw images, one that is slightly darker than the metering would suggest and one that's slightly higher or brighter than the metering would suggest, and then it combines them together in camera to create an image with a much higher dynamic range and stores it as a JPEG. On the screen you can see three images. One that's slightly darker, one that's slightly brighter, and then the combined image that was saved as a JPEG by the camera, and which you can see has higher dynamic range. You can see more detail in both the shadows and the highlight areas. So let's look at how we set this up in camera. Firstly, you've got to be in JPEG, otherwise you'll find the option is greyed out. Then go to the photo shooting menu, and right near the bottom of the menus you'll find HDR high dynamic range as an option. But let's go inside and look at what the options are. The first option is HDR mode, and this is where you set up how you want to shoot HDR. Do you want to shoot a single image, after which the camera will automatically revert to normal shooting mode? Or do you want to shoot a series of HDR images and the camera will keep shooting in HDR mode until you go back into the settings and turn it off? The second option, exposure differential, is where you set up the difference you want between the darker shot and the brighter shot. And here you can set it to 1, 2 or 3 stops, or you can set it to auto to let the camera look at the situation that you're in and work out what it thinks is the best option for you. The next option, smoothing, is about how you want the camera to blend the two images, and you've got the option of high, normal or low here. High will blend the images quite carefully around the edges, but it might lose some sharpness. Low will be sharper, but if there is any movement between the images then you will get some blurring. I tend to leave it at normal on here as it seems to work quite well at that level for me. Finally, you get the option as to whether you want to just capture the output JPEG or whether you want to save the two raw files the camera captures to create the JPEG as well as the JPEG. So once your settings are as you want them, come back out, make sure you're in matrix metering mode, as that's the mode that Nikon recommends, and then focus your image and press shutter release. Now it's important to remember the camera is going to take two images here, so make sure your camera is relatively stable. You can hand hold it, but make sure you are holding it still and that the shutter speed is at an appropriate level. The camera will then, as I say, take the two raw images. There'll be a slight pause while it processes it and stores the JPEG onto your memory card. There are a bunch of scenarios where you can't use HDR. Rather than me read them through, I'll put them on the screen. It's much quicker for you to read them. None of them are particularly surprising. It's a great technique for when you're in a high contrast situation, you perhaps don't have filters or you're taking a very quick shot, and does work well even though it's an in-camera technique. Obviously, if you want to take HDR to another level, it's always possible to take a series of bracketed images and then post-process them into an HDR image. I hope you found this video useful. If you did, hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell next to it. Let us know how you've got on with HDR in the comments below, and I look forward to seeing you on a future video.